So why were we redirected when we actually had an error? Keep in mind that we only call auth login here in the try block, not in the catch block. So if we have an error, we actually shouldn't be redirected because we're not triggering the login action. Well, the problem we have there is that the way the fetch API works, if you get back a 400-ish or a 500-ish error code from the backend, it still treats it as not an error because technically you have no error. You sent a request and you got back a response. Sure, it's a response with an error status code, but that's really just the data attached to the response. Technically, there was no error. And therefore, we don't make it into the catch block if we do have a 400-ish or 500-ish response status code. Now, in my application, I want to make it into the catch block though, because for me, it clearly is an error if we have a 400-ish or 500-ish status code. And we can thankfully implement this. After we parsed the response body, because I want to use it even if we have an error, after all, it's the response body which will include the error message. So after we parse this, I want to check if response OK. The OK property is a property that exists on the response object, and it will be true if we have a 200-ish status code. Or put in other words, if we have a 400-ish or a 500-ish status code, we'll not make it in here. So if response is not OK, we know we have a 400 or a 500 status code. And in this case, I will throw my error here. So in this case, I want to throw a new error, and I will use the default JavaScript error object and basically pass on my response data.message, which should exist here because we sent back a message property on any error we generate on the backend. Since we throw an error here, this code will not execute, and instead the catch block should trigger. So if we try this again, switch to sign up, and try signing up with this existing email address again. If I click sign up, we see the spinner, of course only briefly because it's so fast, but then we stay here. And you see now this error gets logged from line 88, which is inside of the catch block. So that's great, that's the first step. But logging it like this is not enough. After all, we do manage our state here. So indeed, it would make more sense to also output some visual element here. And for that, I want to render my error modal. I want to render it next to this card and not inside of it. Therefore, since we must only have one root JSX element, I'll wrap this in a React fragment, this entire card, so that next to the card, in front of it, I can render my error modal. Now, the error modal requires an error which I feed in. And this error should be the error message, so I will just use error, and this now is our error state, which we set with setError. Keep in mind, I named this error here. This is my constant, and this is what I'm passing in on this error prop to the error modal. Inside of the error modal, I then have the logic to show this modal if the error is not empty. Well, and then I also wanna add an onClear prop here, because in my error modal, I trigger onClear if we close that modal, which opens up. It's the default modal just wrapped with some extra logic. So we should provide an onClear prop on the error modal, and there I want to execute a function which in the end resets my error. So here I will add a handle error, or actually an error handler, to stay in line with my other naming function. And the only thing I do here is I will call setError to update my error state and set it to null to basically clear it. And now here I can point at error handler. With these changes made, if we go back and we try this again, try creating a user with an existing email password, and I click sign up, now we get this error modal, and when we click OK, we handle this, we can try again. Now, if I use a new email address, which was not taken before, it therefore succeeds and we are redirected, and otherwise, as you just saw, we get this error. So now we have proper error handling and a loading state in place, and I would say our first HTTP request is looking quite decent. With that, let's also work on logging in.